All ready?
Yeah.
So you're running on an anti-corruption platform. You listed a lot of those points today. If you're actually elected to Congress, how will you bring that to Congress and convince your party members to go along with that?
Right. Well, we'll absolutely co-sponsor legislation to make sure that we bring term limits to the floor. And then the second thing is the banning insider trading, which has been brought to the House floor already, but we'll be co-sponsoring that as well. You know, the corporate PAC money thing is a little more difficult. That has to be done through a constitutional amendment to have reform on, on the Supreme Court ruling that happened, 15 years ago. So, we'll be sponsoring legislation on the term limits and the, banning stock trading for sure, and also banning the lawmaker to lobbyist pipeline. So those three you can get done via legislation. The corporate PAC money, ending Citizens United, has to be done really through the constitutional route, but we'll be working on all four of those items.
Don't you think you need a constitutional amendment on term limits? Because there's a term limit for the president in the Constitution now by amendment.
Right. And so we're going to look at all ways to get term limits done. We think it's important. We think 12 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate is plenty of time to get your agenda done, and that's what we'll be fighting for.
You were friendly with. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Laura, go ahead.
You were friendly with Charlie Kirk. Do you support or endorse Turning Point USA following Rob Sand around, heckling and booing yesterday?
I have not seen them following people around, but
they
Charlie
posted videos yesterday.
Okay. Well, Charlie was a good friend of mine, and it's horrible what happened to Charlie. And it was less than a year ago that he was murdered in front of all of us on live TV, and we're proud to stand with Charlie and his legacy and the organization, the movement he built.
I was wondering your response to the pushback from Lindsey James' campaign to your criticism about her religion, her religious beliefs, referring to her as pastor in name only.
Right. Yeah, so I think that if you're a pastor and you think that 6-year-olds can change their gender, I don't think you're much of a pastor. And a lot of people agree with me on that. And so, Laura, I know you asked about the gender-specific question, and I said James Talarico as well, so it wasn't about her being a female, it's about her stances on things that I think just are wrong, and most Iowans think are wrong as well. Other questions? Zach?
Sure. Tell me a little bit about, and some of your background, lobbying on behalf of the real estate industry?
No.
Right?
So I've never been a registered lobbyist ever at the Capitol, which I think we should correct the record on that. Everyone should. So I ran the Iowa Real Estate Developers Association. So I was the executive director and the chairman of the organization. I couldn't lobby legally. Right. There's a moratorium for 2 years, and I left the organization before that 2 years was up for the lobbying period.
Do you feel like that background? Do you feel like it's difficult to kind of be the anti-lobbyist guy now that you come from a background representing industry?
No, not at all. I actually think that it makes me a better advocate to make sure that we don't have, former legislators going in there, because I never intended to be a lobbyist, which is why I wasn't a lobbyist and went back into public service to work for the Trump administration last year. And so I've seen firsthand people that have went, being legislators or being congresspeople, to lobbying in D.C., which is a much worse problem. And there's far more corporate influence in D.C. than there is in New York.
I think there has been some criticism lobbied by Democrats about maybe some campaign contributions accepted from the real estate development industry.
Trade associations aren't corporate PAC money. So Jack, I know you had the video on that.
Totally.
But they are
I mentioned in that video, right, that there's a distinction.
There's a distinction.
Yeah, but the context people are using this is that I said that no corporate PAC money. I mean, there's plenty of Democrats that say no corporate PAC money, take trade association money.
I think up there you said that Lindsey James missed half her votes in the legislature.
Yes.
Were you talking about this year or over the whole 8 years?
This year, yeah, 51%.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So you're not alleging that she missed half her votes over the whole 8 years?
No, just this year she missed 51%. Yep.
The Republican National Committee chair was in Iowa this week,
Yep.
talking about races. Obviously, the Senate race is of utmost importance to keep control of the Senate. And he mentioned 2 districts that were yours as
Yep.
sort of really big targets. So how do you convince donors? How do you convince the party? How do you convince voters of the urgency of the moment in a district that's not really getting national attention at this point?
Right. I mean, I think I've done a nice job. I've raised, close to 2.5 million so far. And again, with no corporate PAC money, we want to add that in there. And so this is from largely have personal donors, a lot of small donors too, a lot of small dollar donors, tens of thousands have given to this campaign to make sure that we're running for what we believe in, which is anti-corruption. And the district, we say it's competitive, but we're running through the tape. I'm not going to take this for granted. I think people have taken this district for granted in the past, and that's why we've lost it before. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to win, hopefully by a sizable margin, but we're not going to slow down anytime soon.
Is that a reference to 2018?
Maybe. I won't comment on that.
You mentioned campaign raising money. You've got to raise an immense amount of money
Right.
for Congress. Tell me a little bit about the strategy. You spent a lot of time in Mar-a-Lago, as I understand, raising money from donors down there. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
I did have a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago. Many people do. There's plenty of Democrats that have very fancy, well-funded fundraisers in New York and California and all over the place. I think it's notable because the president obviously owns Mar-a-Lago. We made a lot of money down there for the campaign from individual donors, and we have, like I said, donors from all over the United States, all over Iowa, mainly small dollar donors, by the way, tens of thousands of them, that we have, and so we're proud. For our record, we're proud of the money that we've been able to raise, not taking corporate back money.
On corporate PAC money, you mentioned that that's kind of a distinct point of your campaign
Yeah.
versus other Republicans. Do you have any policies or positions you can point to that you think you're able to do or advocate for that other people in your party are not because of that?
Well, again, I think us being the only person not taking corporate PAC money and criticizing the Citizens United court decision in 2010 makes us unique in that part, and we'll work with Democrats. This is a bipartisan issue. Everything we talk about is pretty much a bipartisan issue on the anti-corruption platform that we have, and so we're willing to work with Democrats in Congress to get those things done, and we think it's important for the American people, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue.
We're seeing farmers, struggling with high input costs, high fertilizer prices now, high gas, diesel prices. I guess your thoughts on how you would go about easing those financial pressures for them
Right.
and other Iowans, especially with the war going on with Iran.
So I've talked about, just like the president's doing with pharmaceuticals, where he's telling Europe, we're going to have favored nation status, where you can't sell drugs to Europe cheaper than you're selling them to Americans. I think we should do the same thing for fertilizer and seed and pesticides to places like Brazil. Brazil is buying, these input, fertilizer, seed, all of it, at a much smaller cost than we are here in the United States, or our farmers are. So I think we need to do the same type of policy and legislate it, just like they are for favored nation for pharmaceuticals.
We have time for one more.
Following up a little bit on the Iran war, is that something you support if you were in Congress? Would you vote to continue that? And if so, why?
Right? We don't like any wars. We prefer there not to be war. Wars, everyone I think does. And ultimately we need to finish the job though. We need to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. And I think a lot of the American people understand that. And so we're for getting this wrapped up as soon as we can. But ultimately the job needs to get finished. So, okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.